DSPN, the Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
Every week on the DSPN, what a pleasure it always is. I love talking rugby, and no one better to yak with than the 81 Test veteran of the All Blacks. He's going to be on our screens with Sky Sport all year, which is great news. Justin Marshall, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks, Marty. Nice to be back. And, you know, we've been chatting for a few weeks now, but ultimately we are getting much closer to the start of Super Rugby, aren't we? And obviously the Six Nations, which we'll chat about later on in this interview, are starting this weekend as well. So very much rugby season, even though I was watching the Big Bash final last night, and it feels like it's the middle of the cricket season, we're having to start to think about rugby because very soon it's going to be on our doorstep.
Look, I'm talking about that with Matt later on the podcast, about what an innings from the young... I mean, I was just gobsmacked. I ended up falling asleep in front of it because I get up at 4:30 to do the radio breakfast show these days. Good God, mate. I mean, could that boy hit?
Oh, mate, that was just impressive stuff. And obviously what I loved about it was his intent. His intent was to hit the ball hard and to try and hit every ball that was bowled at him. And he was pretty much successful at doing that. And to belt out, I think it was 11 sixes, wasn't it?
11,
it was just mind-boggling to know that somebody is actually capable of doing that consistently and get over a ton and doing that without actually mistiming it that badly that you will eventually go out. And it took him a long time to do that. So, yeah, it was really entertaining to watch. It didn't really make a contest of the game because he was
kind of took it away from them. Yeah, right from the off.
He took the game away from them in 6 overs. Incredible.
Yeah. Pre-season Super Rugby this weekend. Now, calm the farm. It is just pre-season. But what I like about this is exactly what the Blues and the Crusaders are doing, playing at Kirwee. I know, you've obviously, been down from that part of the world. You know where that is, but just in case people don't know, kind of west of Christchurch, you go towards Darfield. I think it's on the way to a place called Glen Tunnel. Who would know? But the fact that there's 3,000 people turning up there, they sell it out. I mean, this is brilliant, isn't it?
Absolutely it is. But because, like, for Super Rugby in general, the games, apart from the odd anomaly, are played at the big stadiums, and that makes them sometimes not touchable to some of the folks that live in those hard to get places, and that makes big stadiums hard to get for them. So for the innovation to take those games and pre-season matches to places like Kirwee, we used to do that for pre-season. We used to go to places like Kirwee, you'd go to Methven as well, and we would train and be around the public there because they are part of our franchise. And equally, I know the other franchises take their games to some remote places. We're about to the Chiefs and the Hurricanes go. Some place where Tui is.
That's in the Wairarapa, and it's where the old. Yeah, I mean, it's that iconic big building. When you actually look at the other fixtures, they're all being played in what I'd call kind of normal places. New Plymouth get a game, but I mean that's a city in itself. But any time that this happens, I always celebrate it. So we aren't going to learn anything. It's pre-season. It's like Alan Iverson says, isn't it? It's just practice. It's pre-season. So let's not get too over about anything to do with the results or anything. When you're playing these pre-season games, what are you actually trying to achieve?
Can I be honest with you? I hated them. The first couple of years that I was playing with the Crusaders, so we're back in 96, 97, I didn't hate them as much because what you're trying to do is establish yourself. But by the time you get a little longer in the tooth and you're around your 5th or 6th year in a franchise, those pre-season games are basically just about getting through them. You want to get a decent hit out and get your body in tune for what's going to be a completely different set of physicality than you experience at training in the opening round game. But also you've trained your ass off, Marty. For 2 to 3 months, you've been working hard, you're feeling fit, and you don't want to knock yourself around too much because what you ultimately want to do, and we've spoken about this, is play every game of the round robin and then get into the finals, and you want to play as much super as you can. So preseason games, they're all about, yes, trying to establish and find your rhythm, but they're always a bit clunky, to be honest. And I think more than anything, it's just getting the players used to the speed and the tempo of what that type of rugby is going to be all about, because you can't replicate that at training. So you have to do it in pre-season matches. But in general, in terms of game pattern and the way that you want to play for the year, you probably get more out of that on the training field than you did in a pre-season game. When you're changing players constantly, there's no rhythm. People are coming off after 10 minutes. There's 20-minute water breaks. It's a bit of a shambles. So I think it's more just for getting the body nice and hardened.
Six Nations kicks off this weekend. I think next to the World Cup, we've talked about this, it's the greatest rugby tournament in the world next to that. No disrespect to our own rugby championship, but it has that history, isn't it? And so we spoke last week and your thoughts then about who we thought were going to win. I wanted to ask you this week about what are the best games to be at? And for any rugby fan, going to the Six Nations, if you're not from the UK, I mean, part of the whole deal is that these separate countries have just rivalries beyond rivalries because it dates back hundreds of years. It dates back to your great whatever grandfather took my great house from way back. But if you just had to run by a few, what are your must-watch ones or must-attend ones?
Yeah, it's a really valid question. And again, I was fortunate enough to be there for the first couple of rounds last year. And I certainly feel that whilst there's history and tradition, with any of those sides that basically take on France or they take on Italy, the real intense rivalry, and I felt this when I played. The first time I played for the Ospreys and we played an English team, I'd been in the team for about 3 months, and then we started the Anglo-Welsh competition. And it was just a different level. The changing room mood for the Welsh just completely changed. We were taking on an English team, Harlequins, and I certainly feel that if you want to know what that real historic rivalry that dates back hundreds of years is all about, any of those games between Wales and England, Scotland in particular, they always have a different type of intensity about it. You throw Ireland in the mix as well, particularly when they play England. There's been some history here. Yeah. No disrespect to the fact that when you want to watch England versus France or Ireland versus France, are going to be a couple of the great games of the tournament. But if I said to somebody, go watch Wales play England in Cardiff, or go along to Murrayfield and watch the Scottish play England, or watch them play the Welsh. That's where you really know what Six Nations rugby and history is all about.
That thing about growing another leg, it does actually happen, doesn't it? I mean, I go back through the results and, Scotland, the only game they might have won in Six Nations over time is always against England. England going for a Grand Slam, they lose against Scotland. Why? It doesn't matter what your form is at that time. It's all of these things you're talking about.
Yeah, and I think the players, they feel that intensity during the week. They know exactly that they can actually, regardless of form, go out and put a performance in that basically is significant for that history. And I certainly feel that throughout the course of the Six Nations, yes, there are teams that play well and consistently are at the top of that competition. But equally, there's always upsets. There are always upsets in this competition, right because of what you just said, that for some reason or another, some of these teams just find a way. And if things start to go right really early in matches, like put it this way, the Welsh have dropped 12 test matches, haven't they? Yeah, and we talked about that last year on the bounce. Their game against England, in Cardiff at Millennium Stadium, is already sold out. It's been sold out for 2 months. Mm-hmm. They have no right to sell out 85,000 people with the form that they've presented in the last 2 years. But this just goes to show you what the Six Nations mean to them. And you imagine being one of those Welsh players running out onto that stadium, seeing all that sea of red and the odd white jersey there that's travelled down from London. And all of a sudden, like you say, they can grow an arm and a leg or two and really make a contest of it.
All right, then. We're still calling it that. It's Ireland and France. Those are the top two teams. Although
yeah,
I just think, just watch England. I don't think they're as bad as what people think, and I thought they were coming back as well. But as you say, I mean, all of these results, I mean, you look at them every weekend, and there's always a surprise.
Yeah, there is. And to be fair, there's a few banana skins out there. Like, I wouldn't like to be playing Scotland at Murrayfield. They're a handful there. Mm-hmm. And equally, Italy, they're no pushover. Particularly, the French have got to be very wary of them. They don't travel as well, but I don't mean to be picking on Wales. They did beat Wales last year in Cardiff. So they're capable of the odd upset. But for me, the big three, Ireland, England and France, have to be very, very wary, I think, of Scotland, because they could really throw a spanner in the works in this competition and cause a couple of upsets. They were well in it last year. I think they won their first three, or definitely first two, which really put them in contention. And then they faded away a little bit, but they're a better side now. Losing Tui Pelotu, their centre and captain, not ideal, because he's been a big part of why they've been very good lately. So that'll be a bit of an Achilles heel for them trying to replace him. But hey, watch out for them this year, the Scottish.
Also, Six Nations have adopted the Southern Hemisphere 20-minute red card rule. And we were talking about this with TJ last week and the fact that, they don't like, looking at anything innovative that we do down here and thinking, oh, we are going to adopt that. This is just good sense in your mind. And do you think it's something that now that that's been adopted, we're going to see this right throughout all international rugby?
I hope so. Look, there's just too much ambiguity and inconsistency around high shots. And when I mean that, I mean it with the word intentional and not intentional.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Incident as opposed to accident and that kind of thing, isn't
exactly.
it? Exactly.
Yeah. And I don't think any rugby player out there nowadays wants to go out there with the intent and purpose to take someone's head off and to injure them. No, it's just the timing and collision thing. And the fact that sometimes it's reckless, yeah, rightly it deserves a red card, but the majority of the time it's not reckless. It's just bad timing. And all of a sudden, we all suffer because of bad timing. Yeah. That player gets taken out of the game. One team goes down to 14 and it really nullifies the contest. So, look, I understand that there's still drums banging to try and keep the full-time red card to stop this from happening, but I don't think we'll ever get it out of the game because those little microseconds in between contact, going to ground, dipping, all of that sort of stuff, you'll never be able to control that. And making a full red card won't do that. That won't make the players change their mindset in any way. So I think this is a great call. 20 minutes, you can still put some pain on the opposition if you're good enough. Yep. Whereas if you're the one that's down to 14, you can survive, galvanise, stick together, and keep the game a contest. So, yeah, really good to see they've actually adopted something that we have been advocating for quite a while, Marty. Hallelujah. Yeah. Things are changing. Unbelievable.
Well, look, it's entertainment is what it is. And as soon as you get that red card, you can feel the collective sigh all around the world, everyone watching, because we're all thinking the same thing. It's almost impossible for a 14-man rugby team to beat any 15-man rugby team. It doesn't matter what level that you're playing at. And, again, it's about the spectator, and this is what rugby's got to think. Every other sport, is clamouring for attention at the moment. If you want people to stick with your sport, it's complicated and hard enough to watch at times anyway. This, to me, just makes good common sense. And what it does, as you say, is it just provides a safety barrier underneath, hey, I got it wrong, but it's not a foul. Look, to me, red cards, Justin, there are two things. Deliberate foul play or any kind of act of violence or anything like that, or persistent, consistent professional fouling. Those things get off and don't come back, okay? But the rest of it is just what happens in a game of high-speed, big players colliding with each other.
Absolutely. And you're bang on. And look, let's not forget that if it is deemed to be slightly reckless and still, like I said, without the true intent to, purposely injure somebody, then that person doesn't get to compete in the game anymore. So they do get punished. Like the 20-minute red card, yes, it restores the opposition back to 15. But if they do say, that was reckless, 20 minutes is punishment enough for the team, but for that player, he can't come back.
Can't come back, yeah.
So that is actually still reinforcing to players, hey, you got it wrong, and we see that you had enough intent in there, but not a high level of danger, whatever it may be, but you can't play anymore, and now you're going to have to go to the judicial, and we'll decide when you can next play. So you are still getting hurt by being off timing and getting your tackle technique or whatever wrong.
I'm going to talk to Matt also a little bit later on about the Sevens, but just quickly, I was watching, I didn't actually. I walked into the pub on Friday and the Sevens was up there on the screen, and I just didn't even know that the Sevens tournament was on. And I just wonder, in the clamour for trying to make this a global sport and expanding it, they've almost killed it in the same act, haven't they? Is the Sevens just about the Olympics anymore? It used to be one of the biggest, baddest, and I say that in the best possible way, sporting events in the country. We don't even have it anymore, and I just wonder how many people are really interested now in that World Series 7 circuit outside of the Olympics or the comms.
Yeah, they just don't seem to be getting the crowds they used to be. At some of the venues they do, but the vast majority of it has seen a drop-off, and I think probably when you look at Sevens now, they might be victims of the volume of rugby we are having to consume now as well. So unless you are a real Sevens aficionado and that's your sport that you watch regularly and you tune in for that and you don't watch much 15s, then you're sure they'll be the people going to the stadiums and tuning in to the games on TV. But in general, it is on a decline. And like I said, I just feel that it's just a victim of how much volume and rugby that we've got. But equally, the fun piece are out there, aren't they?
Yeah,
and they
killed it in Wellington, mate.
It cost, I think, Wellington the sevens because, they didn't want people to have great fun. They were having problems with alcohol consumption and people dressed up and dancing and being silly, but people were just having a good time. So, yeah, unfortunately, a few of those big tournaments, like Hong Kong, I think, is not on the calendar anymore. They had the last tournament there, didn't they? And, they were big marquee events that showcased those ones. You need showcasing the sport so that when it actually does go to somewhere like Perth, people have seen Hong Kong and go, man, that looks amazing. Look at the people that have an awesome time.
Yeah.
Right, let's go along. But at the moment, it's not getting that exposure, and that's probably part of the problem as well.
Let's end it just talking about Super Rugby, and just such a shame that Wallace Satiti is going to be out for the season. I mean, I thought he was one of the guys that I really wanted to watch every week. He's, to me, a reason to tune in and watch. It's like we were saying last week when Artie playing for MP. I want to see how that team galvanises because of him. So it's a real shame for Wallace, and hopefully this isn't a long-term thing, that he does come back and comes back as well as he played last year, because you can't be the standout emerging player in world rugby, can you? And not have huge expectations on you. But just a couple of players, a couple of names throw at us that you think you'd watch out for this guy, or maybe even positions that you think these are the positions now that we need players to come through. Now, they may not be All Blacks this year, but just give us some names that we think, okay, maybe this year, maybe next year.
Yeah, I certainly feel there are opportunities out there. And when you look at Geordie Barrett being away, that 12 jersey is an important jersey for the All Blacks, and traditionally it has been. And one that I feel that if someone in Super Rugby can put their hand up, I wonder where Dallas McLeod is now, after such a meteoric rise, and then all of a sudden he found himself on the wing, because he is a true 12, and then probably hasn't had the best last season and a half. There's a massive opportunity there for, I think, somebody to grab a hold of that jersey. What's Anton Leonard-Brown going to do? Is he a 12 or is he a 13? And I'm really interested to see where that jersey goes. But obviously with Wallace Satiti being out, again, that's offered another massive opportunity. And Sam Cane, obviously moving on, there is a position there in those loose forwards that somebody needs to grab
too. Yeah, hell yes, yes.
Just wonder, whether young Nico Jones is going to get any opportunities this year. But equally, Peter Larkai, to me, had a really good season 2 years ago. Then massively, the loose forwards at the Hurricanes played unbelievable last year. And so, guys like Yosei and that were outstanding. Brad Shields is playing some of his best rugby. And Larkai was still a really good performer and was in the All Blacks.
He played well against France.
This is his year. Yeah, this is his year to really take that next step. I had a beer with Razor in Ireland. And he was massively complimentary of him at training and his work ethic and the things that he's doing. But obviously he just didn't take that next step, because Wallace Satiti took basically that role within that loose forward mix, with Razor preferring experience in Cane and Savia over having two rookies in there, or two players that are a little green. So you keep an eye on Peter Larkai this year. He's one player that I really feel we could do with stepping up and having a real statement year. And again, I've been scratching my head, because you asked me the question yesterday. People might as well know this, and you said, who? And I thought, right, 12's a jersey, but I was trying to think about, well, who is that person? If Geordie was to be injured, who steps into that 12 jersey? Who's going to grab that by the scruff of the neck? And I was going through all the teams. You got your Poi Hippies and players like that, and yeah, I'm just not quite sure, but it's going to be interesting to find out.
See, number 10 is that got a big question mark, to me about it as well. I look at a guy like Tupu Vai, who all of a sudden last year just stepped up into the All Blacks, into the player that we wanted to be. And then I look at a guy like Dalton Papali'i, who to me just hasn't made that same leap for the All Blacks as well. Right. So there's plenty of guys, and no disrespect to him, but here's a guy that I just think, I just demand more of him when he plays for the All Blacks, and he hasn't, I don't think, shown the form that he probably knows he's actually capable of, if he's honest. So there's a lot of questions, and this is just part of the whole kaleidoscope, the whole kind of jigsaw that I'm looking forward to in a couple of weeks' time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I think there's plenty of opportunities out there. Rugby in New Zealand is ruthless, Marty. It really is. There's so much depth.
Well, it has to be, Justin. It has to be. If we want the All Blacks to be the All Blacks, it's got to be ruthless, mate.
Big time, mate. Yeah, and if you slip off form, you all of a sudden find yourself not being spoken about anymore. I think of someone like Levi O'Moore. I also think of Umanga Jensen down at the Highlanders.
Yeah, those guys
playing great rugby in the centres, and then just injury, but plus drifting and fluctuations in form, and all of a sudden you're not
Tukiaho
out in the All Black circle anymore.
Yeah,
you're being talked about even making the starting team for Super Rugby. So, and like you say, you mentioned Papali'i and co, and now massive year for Ethan de Groot because of the emergence of Tamaiti Williams last year at a breakout year. Yeah, it can happen really quickly that you slip down the ladder, but there are plenty of opportunities there for players to step in, because there are some All Blacks that will not be making next World Cup, and we need to be winning each Test match, as you and I have spoken about, and what we need is healthy competition to make those guys that are more experienced still playing bloody good rugby in between Rugby World Cups and pushing themselves.
Well, if you're looking for a fix, people, Six Nations, a great way to start this weekend.
Oh yeah, certainly is. Looking forward to it. Wales against France, opening game. That's going to be interesting. Can the Welsh and Warren Gatland defy the odds and cause an upset? I don't think so, but you never know with the Six Nations.
DSPN.